and welcome to today's Reuters Plus webinar, From Complexity to Clarity, Empowering Innovation with Intelligent Automation. I'm Nadira Tudor, and over the next 45 minutes, we're going to explore how modern enterprises are transforming operations by integrating AI-driven automation into their core business processes. But this isn't about buzzwords, it's about the real business impact. How can cloud-based platforms bring together applications and the huge amount of real-time data they produce and turn it into actionable insights? We'll look at how advanced AI agents are already orchestrating collaboration, automating routine tasks, and accelerating smarter decision-making. The result? Greater efficiency, innovation, and agility across every function of the business. We're also going to hear about the shift from isolated processes to an end-to-end digital core, where data, strategy, technology, and people are fully integrated. With AI agentic tools, companies can now disrupt traditional processes for better outcomes and see today what they need to deliver tomorrow. To guide us through this complex transition, I'm joined by two expert voices: Manos Raptopoulos, Chief Revenue Officer, Asia, Europe and Middle East, Africa, and member of the Extended Board at SAP; Eli Lambert, Managing Director of Finance Technology and SAP Platform Global IT at Accenture. Together, they'll show us how intelligent automation is already reshaping enterprises, from delivery excellence in AI to businesses moving towards autonomous planning and unlocking new opportunities through managed services. So let's dive straight in. Manos, let's start with the bigger picture. In 2025, how are business leaders defining complexity to clarity, and how is SAP approaching this with your clients?
So looking over the world, at this point we live a very, very significant technological transition. As we are both technology companies, we can witness that also from the inside. But if we go to how real business is being conducted, actually across the world we see a lot of disruption. You can put that disruption in terms of geopolitics, you can put it in terms of supply chain disruptions, you can put it in terms of health events. Truth of the matter is that disruption is kind of business as usual in a way. And businesses are looking to create resilience. They are looking to find ways to be more agile, to be able to compete in that global environment, and all that in an overall context that technology is becoming actually more complex. While it's here to deliver very tangible business outcomes, business results, it's actually becoming more complex. Therefore, it's wherever you go across the world, it's about what outcomes can you guys bring to us, how fast this can happen, and how can this really bring an impact to my business. It's not about the technology, it's never been in a way. It's always about, what can be the tangible result to the business. And in that context, in that complex context, clarity and insights are very important. So we like to say many times we're in the data business, right? How can we ingest all those data and provide customers with meaningful insights?
Really good outlining of where we're at, and that disruption is undeniable, isn't it, Eli? And from your vantage point, which is a very unique vantage point at Accenture, how do these themes resonate with executives that you work with?
Technology is getting more complex, but I think it's because our business stakeholders are expecting more what technology can do. And one of the things I think about is I serve our corporate finance customer inside of Accenture, right? And we run finance on SAP. And what we're finding is that, there are no small problems to solve anymore. They've already been done. And so when we're looking at the dramatic opportunities, right, for the biggest impact, well, they have a finance stakeholder, right? And they might affect a finance business outcome. They actually start more upstream with, partnering with the sales opportunities or, engaging with legal, right? And then they flow into and have kind of different and more complex, business outcomes, more intelligent outcomes, right, that technology can provide in finance. And so it's really more of a broader stakeholder, engagement and expecting more from the technology than we have historically in the past.
Yeah, and that makes it really complicated, doesn't it, Manos?
It does, and in a way, we are in a space where the acceleration is becoming very, very important part of the equation. If we go a few years back, let's say 10 years back, and we represent fairly large organizations, there was a time where customers could afford or could, let's say, justify a project of 2 years. Now it's not anymore the case. It's they need immediate results, and they need them in a both from a time frame perspective, but most importantly, delivering on specific KPIs.
Manos, when you look across industries and we look at patterns and regions, what are those patterns that you're seeing, and where do businesses tend to stumble?
I think it is always about, and we've been on that journey with SAP since I can remember, it's about end-to-end process optimization. Most of the times we stumble in hurdles like we optimize for a siloed approach and we miss the vision across. And because of the fact that technology is becoming more complex, if you have that siloed approach embedded too much in your organization, it's impossible to harmonize the data layer. If you don't harmonize the data layer, it's impossible to run meaningful AI models that will give you something good these days, and it becomes even more painful to get there. So this is something that we see happening a lot, and we see actually customers pivoting to a more unified end-to-end approach. I've heard too many times over the last couple of years, I would compromise for 80% of the functionality for 100% end-to-end optimization if I can, which was not the case in the 5 or 10 years ago, right, Eli?
We have a perfect example of that we're trying to achieve internally today, right? Well, we have this opportunity where, as you said, we've optimized within a function, historically, but the gaps between either process or information, made it clunky. There were obstacles, and it wasn't as efficient as it could be, or as fast, right? Or insights. We're working on something called, contract to cash, right? It's really from the opportunity all the way to cash. And this is something where this is really going to drive a big benefit for finance and our client teams, right? On getting bills calculated and invoiced faster for DSO. But what we realized is we needed to start this process efficiency blocking, taking away the information silos way upstream. So looking at the opportunity, making sure, as that flows through to pricing, into contracting, that we have kind of the clear and consistent information silos broken down into harmonized data, so that we have confidence then to let the technology create automation around the contracting, even in the invoice calculation, right? And automating that end-to-end process is no longer just a finance function and task. We needed to engage broad function stakeholders to achieve that.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the past, are you best of breed type of mentality, or you are best of suite type of mentality when it comes to how you would look at your overall architecture? And I think what we're working on right now, at least from an SAP vantage point, is best of breed as a suite. So we want the suite, but we want the best of breed type of functionality in there. Now, if you take your question a bit further to what's happening right now with AI, another big topic is change management. It has always been, to be fair, right? No matter what is the project that you do, it touches people. At the end of the day, change management is important. But just having the tool doesn't mean people will adopt it.
Absolutely.
You may have the best technology out there, but we are creatures of habit in a way. So the change management aspect is something that we tend to stumble upon from time to time. It was interesting. Last week I was in Japan, and we were having a big customer event, and we were having roundtables, and the customers were saying that they are measuring how much they make the technology available, and they measure how much people are actually using it, because they don't have the confidence they will, basically. They put programs in place and education and so on in order for them to use it. I don't know.
The adoption is a huge
Adoption
aspect, isn't it?
Even within global IT, internal to Accenture global IT, we actually have a dedicated journey and change component, right? That partners with all of the different functions so that we do exactly what you're describing. It creates the roadmap for success to adopt, but then also measuring the impact and the success so that we can then, justify the next investment, right? Based upon what have been successful behaviors in the past.
So you're kind of reworking really the foundations, aren't you? Or at least trying to encourage people to do that.
Yes, absolutely. And the good thing is that there is so much technology spin right now of things that can be done completely different compared to what we have been doing in the past. There is so much efficiency that we can bring us as a technology provider and developing products. The development cycle can be accelerated massively. So the combination of the two can bring a lot. But we have still to go through the pain, let's call it, of making sure that this is working first and foremost, and people like it and adopt it at the end of the day. Yeah.
I do like Manos' terminology there. The pain is brilliant. Eli, how do you think product strategy is helping customers with that clarity?
Yeah. I love your reference. Like, I would say 5 to 10 years ago, all customers looked the same of SAP. They had an ERP core and maybe a business warehouse for analytics. However, what was different is every differentiation that the customers needed for their business, they had to go customize and customize to the point that no customer ended up looking the same, and managing that over time could be very difficult. What I really appreciate as a customer, right, and an IT lead, for our organization is the product strategy clarifies where to invest in the capabilities today. I think the business suite is something that all customers should look very similar to. Their best practices for really, common or commoditized processes that, we should really be adopting best practices, look a lot like our peers, right? That then lets us leverage the business data cloud level for harmonized data, and whether we're a fully end-to-end SAP stack or a best of breed where SAP plays an important role, but we're connecting into different ecosystems. Harmonizing our data begins to break down those silos and lets us take next actions. Obviously, business AI and AI coming in with insights and new ways of working, right? There's a lot of new capabilities there, right? So you start to differentiate where these investments in technology need to happen, depending on the capability you want to surface. And then finally, a business technology platform that lets us integrate and have extensibility for some of the uniqueness, but without, sacrificing a cleaner core at the business suite level. And I have this clarity now where I can advise my customer stakeholders of where they'd like to invest and surface capabilities that I didn't have before.
I love that, Eli. If I can try to expand a little bit on that, it is very interesting right now that we're getting over that concept. In the past, we were having a lot of discussion. Yeah, but if I do everything best practice, then I'm basically emulating myself with my competition, and nobody wants that. The idea today is that we do best practice where actually you don't get competitive advantage. Mm-hmm. And you still can innovate, you still can do that, but there is a way to do it so that you don't compromise the data integrity side, you don't lose the semantics, and you can still be able to take advantage of the new technology. And that's why I think this is now getting traction in all the businesses, including Accenture. I appreciate.
I'm going to ask you both this. If you had to define the essence of clarity in just one phrase, Eli, I'll start with you. What would it be?
Yeah, I think it's common processes and harmonized data leading to your differentiated insights and outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely that. I stole it from my mouth. Insights to outcomes. Eli, I love it, yes.
Okay, right. We'll move on to the operating model. Manos, would you mind describing the operating model and explain where built-in guardrails, security, privacy, approvals, explainability show up in the flow of work and not just in policy documents?
Yes, and if I can use a couple of examples, Nadira, for that. I'd like to make a distinction, and let me take the vantage point of AI, right? Because it's something that we discuss a lot with customers. There is rarely a conversation these days that you don't get into that point 5 minutes into a conversation. AI has been around for a while. This form of AI that is relatively new is the generative AI. What is the difference between, let me call it, traditional AI and generative AI? Traditional AI or normal algorithms are deterministic. Mm-hmm. generative AI is probabilistic. Therefore, literally, you have to make sure that whatever you put in front of a customer is has actually the right level of accuracy if we are going to put that AI for enterprise use. I will give a very simple example that most of the people that are watching us probably already know. Try to do a word count with Gen AI. It's close enough to the actual word count, but probably it misses something like 5%, 10%, and we will get there, right? It's not an issue. At some point, it's not such a big problem. But in an enterprise world, you need to make sure that this number is accurate. If you're a CFO, you need to know exactly what your cost base is, how much you sold last quarter, what is your EBITDA. It cannot have slack.
You can't afford that slack.
You can't afford that. Yes, it drives stock behavior. It drives investor outcomes, right? So it's important. Therefore, you need to make sure that whatever you give, and going to the guardrails topic, you need to make sure that whatever you give is enterprise grade in that respect, if it's going to be used for that level of outcomes. The second point is the topic of what level of information or what type of information you allow someone that makes the question or uses the AI to access. So we call that authorization concept, right? Not everybody is equal in an organization in terms of the information they are privileged or allowed to access, right? And you need to safeguard this. And then there are topics around privacy. There are topics around ethics when it comes to AI. And we, as a company, we are committed to make sure that these principles are adhered to. So we rely, of course, on external bodies. So we have institutionalized an external advisory ethics committee when it comes to the development of our AI. And we also have an internal body that comprises of different stakeholders, including employees, in order to validate those statements. So it goes all the way from how do you make sure that what you provide is actually accurate, to making sure that this is actually ethically acceptable in the context that you are going to use it in an organization.
Yeah. I'll add to that. I think you take those themes in an organization like Accenture, where we rely on SAP for finance. All of that is multiplied by 10, right? I think when you think about how can you leverage generative AI, well, we can't be using it to get close on numbers. We have to be accurate on numbers, but we can use it for some of the use cases that our controllership entities have around, making sure, for instance, like some of the summaries that they have for balance sheet reconciliations are there. Like a lot of times that was a very decentralized task in our organization, and then it had to be rolled up globally, and then they had to make sense or heads or tails of what are the major themes and the shifts in cost categories. But some of those themes you can apply machine learning to, get a standard summary out, and then we roll that up to our global controllership, and we actually give them a Gen AI agent to interact with that and delve into where the differences are. And so while the numbers are the foundation, some of the interaction and the commentary you can leverage AI for. And then some of the things that we have with SAP around security, principal propagation across our solutions, maintaining what you have access to all the way through the architecture. SAP has a big competitive advantage in the industry of seeing, from the transaction all the way through the insights and the outcomes, we can preserve that kind of security and principles of propagation for individual users. And so we really appreciate that as a customer in finance, that SAP is able to build that foundation for us.
So I suppose, Manos, in simple terms, how does SAP's operating model bring together applications, data, and AI?
Yeah, and it's great that you put that, Nadir, in a layer fashion, because this is exactly how we think about it, actually. First and foremost, that has always been the crown jewel of SAP. We are about end-to-end process optimization, as we were saying in the beginning. So the application layer is foundational for us. And what the application layer does is actually it gives you very clean and very high quality enterprise level data. So you get directly, if you have the right application layer and if the semantics of the data are harmonized between them, then you get the data layer and you get rich, clean data that you can use for AI development. Therefore, our operating model, simply put, is you have the application layer, the data layer of good quality data, then you can train AI on those data. It is more likely that this AI is producing tangible results for customers, so customers bring more data in, and then you have a virtuous cycle. We call it a flywheel effect. So that's, in simple terms, the operating model. Now, where this model really took off at the beginning of this year was where we combined, through a product that we launched in the market, it's called Business Data Cloud, we combined the structured world of the enterprise data, which is typically what you get from SAP applications, with the data lakes, the unstructured world. And how you combine those data in a seamless way without copying data and doing it in very low cost, but doing it also very efficiently and building an ecosystem of players around it. And this, we believe, is gonna provide what we call data products and insights to customers, because they could combine the both worlds, which was previously not impossible, but it was very costly and very time consuming. And Eli, if I can turn to you, what were the biggest wins in your organization in terms of harmonizing those layers, and what are practical outcomes out of that?
Yeah, I think, we're reading off the same script in some regards, but I think, the fact that the business suite, right, is something that we rely on, that, if it can be best practices and harmonized, we can not only simplify, across our organization how we operate core processes, we can also be consumers of enhancements and investment that SAP is doing on the platform for us regularly. Historically, we found that if we tailor every single commodity transaction to suit our needs at that moment, it makes leveraging the investments that the platform is providing, and now, and you're very pushed to more of the public cloud and cloud capabilities, you're more of an innovation engine that we could ever keep up with, right, on our own. And so processes in the business suite, I think, you want to be standard so you can consume investments and new capabilities faster. I think we were early adopters in DataSphere. We were early adopters in SAC Analytics Cloud, and bringing that together in Business Data Cloud as a harmonized data layer that we can then leverage insights and power, have power that data into our unique or differentiated use cases, is something that we hadn't had capabilities to do before. It was very, maybe static in like a business warehouse. It's much more, alive, and it lets us create new outcomes and new insights in the BDC stack. We're very excited, and we're working with you in the business AI. We've been partnering with customer innovation services on how we can build more agentic and AI-powered solutions, right, and across our stack, whether it's in the business suite, leveraging the data in Business Data Cloud, or even in BTP apps for the kind of side-by-side differentiation that we need for our enterprise. It's using those elements of your product stack and your product strategy of where we want to be intentional on our investments is what's giving us the most value as a customer.
And Eli, have you already starting seeing the connection between the unstructured world, let's call it, and the structured enterprise data world?
Yeah, and it's interesting because you have a very different type of value and types of insights and answers you can questions you can answer with whether structured data or unstructured, right? And I think there's a rich set of tools within kind of BTP of being able to bring those together. I think SAP definitely has a competitive advantage around the ontology of its own data, right? Answering specific questions and not having any of the Gen AI hallucinations, right? But also with DataSphere being able to bring in external data and even our operational data, our processes, and matching those together, we're getting much better clarity and recommendations for our business users.
I'm going to ask you both, if you had to highlight one element that makes this model future-proof, what would it be? And Manos, I'm going to start with you. Future-proof
is a big word, right? So it's, go back 3 years and see whether we were working, or all the industry was working, or customers towards a future-proof type of future. And then something disruptive comes in as generative AI, and everything changes. So I wouldn't go as far to define something as future-proof, but I would say that you can't miss out on this one. It is a little bit of a different concept, right? So while you have to, start from the business fundamentals. Business fundamentals means your supply chain needs to work, whatever your supply chain is. Your customer relationship needs to work, and you need to have a robust finance underlying foundation. When it comes to this wave that we have right now, generative AI, you can't miss that because your competitors are going to probably take advantage of it, and it's not, improbable that you even get disrupted or even lose big parts of your business. Therefore, that muscle we need to train in every company, I believe, and this is what we are working on very actively to bring to life, pretty much to Eli's examples before, to bring to life tangible use cases that the customers can actually get efficiencies out of. Because there are efficiencies, despite early signs, and I have to say that generative AI at large fails to produce tangible business results. And I may say that, Eli, I'm not sure if you've seen, there is a project called Nanda project where famously some MIT professors are also participating. Very recently, I think we're talking about a few days before, a report came out. Research shows that 95% of the agentic AI use cases fail to produce tangible business outcomes. It's pretty big, 95%, right?
Huge percentage.
So, and this is where we come in, right? We come in from the angle, okay, let's make that work. And of course, the first cases might not be as obvious or as easy, but it doesn't mean you don't have to go through this. We have to go through this phase, through this process, until we get there.
Yeah. I think actually for me, the biggest thing you can do to future-proof our capabilities is actually, unleashing our data in a harmonized, and breaking down the silos, because everything that we can do with technology going forward, and it will change, and it will get better, and it will evolve, it's clear it's relying on the data being accessible and clean, sure. And the broader impact you can make is the broader set of data you can bring together in a harmonized way. I do think, with the recent study on Gen AI, I think there's a maturity curve, right? I think that everybody is, and I think there's a lot of very useful behaviors and learning in the experimentation phase and the individual use case phase. It's the foundation of your understanding of how to enable and power that gets you to more of the strategic business outcomes that completely reinvent and disrupt processes. But jumping right into that outcome, I think, can be very challenging. And so I think you need to go through that learning curve. And so I think those early, fail and fail fast is what's powering the future successes in Gen AI.
Fascinating. Now we're going to move on to real-world impact. And Manos, could you give us a couple of quick snapshots of intelligent automation making a dramatic difference?
Yes,
I kind of like this question.
It's actually very, very interesting to see how customers worldwide are taking different approaches, and many of them have already achieved great results. I will comment one European customer. They are in the space of industrial electrification, automation. And what they have achieved, they handle really complex quotes. When it comes to quoting for a customer, because of their industrial nature, they handle very complex quotes. Using AI, they were able to shorten the time to produce a quote from 15 days to literally hours. So it's less than a day right now. And of course, it's much more accurate, much less error prone. Another example from Asia, a utility customer. This customer is using predictive AI in order to maintain, to do maintenance, predictive maintenance on their grid. And they have tremendous results because they managed to maintain the equipment in a more efficient way from a financial perspective, but also have better service, so that it doesn't fail as it used to fail with the traditional maintenance mode. So there are a lot of examples across the world that give us this type of feeling that there is something tangible and something very real.
Thank you, and they're great examples. And Eli, what are the most pertinent examples from Accenture's work where intelligent automation really did help?
Yeah. So, Manos, as you know, a couple of years ago, we won an SAP Innovation Award for intelligent cache. And a couple of years ago, before BDC came along, we won an Innovation Award because we were able to stitch together some really compelling capabilities, right? When we think about intelligent cache, you're thinking about data and processes from finance, procurement, treasury, liquidity. We needed to bring that data together in a data mart at the time. We then needed to go external across our ecosystem to get a machine learning insight. And then we needed to drop it into a recommendation and planning engine, right, where we could display that in front of our teams. If you think about that pattern, that's exactly what Business Data Cloud can bring together, right? And we look at that pattern and we say, wow, we could do what we took it months and over a year to build. We could do it in days and weeks now, right? If you bring the data together in a harmonized way in DataSphere and Business Data Cloud, you're using the Databricks, machine learning insights, and then you visualize that in SAP Analytics Cloud for recommendation, but also human interaction, right? That human in the loop component, right? That's the kind of power going forward. And we were part of a private preview of Business Data Cloud. We were doing these kind of insights, and this was the first aha moment we had with that. And we signed, and now we're moving ahead with that in this quarter. So we're excited about that opportunity in front of us. And when I see use cases, I see a pattern, because oftentimes a particular pattern, in this case with our treasury organization, you can repeat over and over just by changing kind of the context in another part of our finance group. Recently we co-innovated together, co-developed the cash application BTP solution, right? This is something where, with payables, you control the data end to end, and so you can have a very high matching rate in the high 90s, right? Automation is perfect. But in receivable side, when we're getting payments for customers, sometimes it's a partial payment, sometimes it's missing some of the key matching information, and it's much more manual to apply. That was our experience, right? And we were able to more than double our automation pass-through end-to-end automation rate. And in areas where we weren't quite sure, we had recommendations where you could just kind of one-click match our receivables, and it's something that we could use, as an extensibility within business technology platform, but it was a machine learning element that guided us for automation to that kind of impact, right? And I love use cases that provide a recommendation, because if the threshold's high enough, automation. Otherwise, it's more of an insight. If it doesn't meet a certain threshold, it's an insight, it's a guide. We can either just accept it, or we can say, hey, there's something different about this, let's explore that use case. So just some of the things that we've done with our finance and corporate finance customers that they've really appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the automation point, and thinking also of the power that you can bring in. I mean, that brings me in mind another example. If you go to planning scenarios, it could be financial planning, which can become very complex. It becomes actually increasingly complex with all the disruptions we were discussing before, or supply chain planning, where you need thousands or even millions of data points. Then you really harness the power of the technology. Brings me in mind another example from a consumer goods industrial manufacturer that they managed through SAP Analytics Cloud to improve their overall planning process, taking into account 2 billion planning nodes, which is combination of SKUs, locations, geographies, or whatever. Every combination brings you a node, right? And in order to plan within that very complex network, it's super difficult. But with the current availability of technology, this is actually possible to produce very, very accurate results about your plan.
I'd love to talk to that customer, because we're doing the exact same thing with the multi-year modeling on SAC, and so we're finding the exact same kind of opportunities there. It's lovely to hear.
All right, let's exchange notes.
I love it.
It is incredible. It is. There's no doubt about it. Manos, I'd like to understand your thoughts on what role does scale play? How do organisations move from pilots to enterprise-wide impact?
Yes, it's a very good question, and I think the velocity will change as agentic AI proliferates more. And let me go one step back. When we started this AI journey or journeys, and talking about our internal thinking, we were trying to discover the business case, the killer app kind of thing, right? A little bit also hyped from the technology itself. And then we started turning into a direction which is, okay, the killer app might still be there, and every organization has its own thinking, and you mentioned a few very interesting examples with bottom line results. But what if we started implementing small incremental changes across the organization? And right now we have a portfolio of 400 of those cases that go across our suite of products. 400 cases that you can consider them single task, single user type of, but if you add up everything of that, it produces a very interesting efficiency result overall. So what we learned out of that process is that now that we are designing our agentic approach, which is basically has more reasoning and has the actionable point on that, that's an agent in effect, and agents can start talking to each other. Now we are taking that to the next level, and then we have about 40 scenarios that we're going to release, and that is going to give us scale. And by the way, we're not alone in this whole approach, because I don't think there will be one ring that will rule them all, if I can use the analogy, right, from Tolkien. At the end of the day, there will be specialized AIs or specialized agents. There will be agents provided by SAP, by other vendors. And as an industry, we need to create the bridge between those agents. That's why we also partnered with Google and created a consortium with other technology leaders in order to create that common language, let's call it. So agent-to-agent communication, basically. So I think we are about to see that scale happening as we learn out of this iterative processes, as more technology is made available to customers.
If we move on now to decision making, let's focus on best practices. Eli, I think we'll start with you. Would you talk us through your journey with SAP and what's helped you get the most out of your work? I know we've touched on a lot, but this is your opportunity to give your perspective on this.
Yeah, so I love this question, and you know, actually we have this opportunity a lot because as both a customer of SAP, right, but also part of Accenture, and what is Accenture doing whenever we talk to our customers. I talk to a lot of our peer customers about that very same thing. They want to know best practices, and they typically ask, you know, are there other customers like me? Am I going on this journey alone, or you know, has someone kind of gone down a path that I can leverage from, right? And I think, you know, when I think about that, I think about a lot of the customer advisory board opportunities we get to be part of, right, where you come together as a communities within your line of business, and you know, you have those group connections, and then you talk to other customers, right? And I think that's a big part about being, you know, an SAP customer is a big ecosystem within their line of businesses where they can reach out to and align on where they're unique, but also where they have common opportunities, right? And I think a lot of the customers are, you know, oh, great, I love what I'm hearing from Manos, where do I begin, right? And I think, you know, it's important to think about, this isn't an IT for IT, you know, business investment. You really need a business stakeholder and sponsor, even if it's cross-function, who's willing to lead and define, you know, what is the value and why you want to go down this path, and, you know, the teams that will be, you know, required to get into this, because it really can be dramatic outcomes, right? But we need that kind of vision and sponsorship to keep going. A lot of questions we get around is, where do I start? And I think, you know, what you said is there are modular components, or you can look at kind of some of the quick win analytic moments, but you're going to create a plan where you can have these early quick wins, but also moving in a direction that fundamentally changes your outcome. You know, these companies are on a moving train, and as SAP invests in new product strategies, right, it's also a moving train, right? And so navigating those to a successful outcome is hugely important, right?
And hugely complex.
And complex, right? And I think a big part of that complexity, right? People ask, I still have a business to run, right? I need to be able to ensure rigor and discipline and quality, right? And a big part of that, I think, is your release management, right? We have a release management governance that makes sure we prioritize, you know, the success and quality that your business is running today and expected outcomes and SLAs, but also how do you layer in the new technologies, what's expected from them, what's going to interoperate well together, what changes do you make foundationally. Release management is a huge thing that you need to be able to provide, to navigate an outcome like this. And then, lastly, I'd say is get help. There's help out there, right? We find it's very valuable, our relationship with Max Attention, to get insights in product engineering, because product engineering with SAP helps you see around the corner or gives you opportunity to share, impacts and changes that you think could be very valuable. Then also, I have to say, an SI who's had experience doing some of that stuff, right? And near and dear to my heart, I can always recommend an SI at Accenture. But I think getting the help you need from those who can help you see around the corner, who has experience going down that journey that you're looking to take, I think is hugely beneficial.
And hugely crucial, I would add.
Yes, and we touched also the best practice versus innovation before topic. A customer asked a really insightful question very recently. We were concluding a meeting which went, let's say, in the directions that I hope the customer was expecting. And at the end, the customer asks, okay, what is the discussion that we didn't have and we should have had, right? And so they are looking for that benchmark, let's call it, and they don't look into their own industry. In the past, it was probably more within the industry. Right now, everybody's looking left and right to see where are those pockets of innovation that I can leapfrog potentially, or can I copy? And to that end, another customer that is a big consumer, European consumer customer, they said, okay, how can we use the available technology to reimagine what we're doing? And a specific example of what they were talking about. They were saying, I have a big transportation network across the world. Actually, they are worldwide. Transportation means that you have to optimize routes, you have to optimize schedules, you have to optimize how you load your trucks. But that because you own that. And you say, okay, this truck needs to go there and do that within that time window. And there is even scheduling software for that. But then they say, I know the cost of labor, how much a driver costs. I know more or less I can calculate the maintenance costs. I know the price of fuel. So they had the data points. And they say, if I have all those data points, why don't I determine a price? And I go to my preferred supplier and say, if you meet that price, which I consider to be, let's call it fair, we continue to do business. And why that's transformational? Because they say, in that way, I don't need to run a procurement process. I don't need to go through all the pain of creating an RFP, inviting everybody, and so on. So I'm closer to the final outcome while I maintain crucial business partnerships that for me work. And I found that quite insightful in terms of reimagining processes.
Eli, these aren't tech-only projects necessarily. What's your advice on the people side?
Yeah, I think, in Accenture, we have this vision around reinvention, right? And that thinks about the outcomes that our people are driving towards. It looks at the people involved, the processes, the tools and platforms and data, right? And we get our best ideas from our people and asking them to invent, right, and brainstorm on how can they disrupt areas that they have a lot of institutional knowledge on, right? And say, what are your pain points? If you had, no restrictions in terms of you can collaborate with partners across functions, how could this look differently? And so we get our best ideas from engaging our people. And so we require more, right? And we reward more the ideas of reinvention ever before, right? And that's very different than, being, say, this is a transaction you have, try to make it as efficient as possible, right? It's a different sort of mindset. I love the journey and change enablement and focus on being able to get folks excited about the journey that they're going on and then celebrate the wins and being able to measure those outcomes and celebrate that it's a team, celebration and achievement, right? I think the people aspect of it is what drives, I think, the success and the speed, right, and the way that it can, create the expected outcomes long into the future.
I can't believe these 45 minutes have flown by so quickly, and I'd really love your key takeaways. And I'm going to start with you, Eli. Key takeaways that you want leaders to leave with.
Yeah, I think it's, IT delivery is a team sport. I think everybody we bring in across the organization, brings a unique element and a role, right? Business sponsorship brings in the vision, right? Our technology platforms bring in the art of the possible, right? Our people on the ground, both business and IT, are going to be the owners and the stewards of that solutions going forward. So bring everybody in the beginning. For me, getting to outcomes like this is really a team sport, and everybody has a role to play.
Manos, you get the final words.
Thank you for that. And I think we are at an exciting time, and I would call all business leaders, and I think that this is already being done, to experiment from one side, but also make sure that they drive for business outcomes. This is what their businesses want at the end of the day, and they look also into us, into that partnership for that. I truly believe there is a lot of potential in the current technology, and I think it's for us to exploit it.
So that brings us to the end of today's webinar, From Complexity to Clarity, Empowering Innovation with Intelligent Automation. We've covered a lot of ground for sure, and I want to leave you with just a few key takeaways. Complexity is the reality, but clarity is possible when you unify applications, data, and AI into a continuous cycle of value. Intelligent automation delivers outcomes, faster cycle times, greater resilience, improved decision-making, and measurable productivity gains. Best practices matter, from maintaining a clean core to reskilling your workforce and embedding responsible guardrails into every workflow. And most importantly, this is not about isolated processes or one-off tools. It's about building a modern digital core that integrates strategy, technology, and people, empowering organizations to innovate today and prepare for tomorrow. So the message is clear. Enterprises can move beyond complexity, harness intelligent automation, and achieve a sustained competitive advantage in this dynamic landscape. On behalf of Reuters Plus, I'd like to thank Manos Raptopoulos from SAP and Eli Lambert from Accenture for their insights and real-world guidance. I'm Nadira Tudor, thank you for joining us, and we hope you've taken away practical ideas that will help you on your journey from complexity to clarity.